Your body is being attacked right now. Not by a virus, not by bacteria, by a hormone your own brain makes every time you feel stressed. And over the next 24 hours, it will silently damage 7 of your organs.
Most people think stress is just a feeling. A tight chest, racing thoughts, sleepless nights. But what's actually happening inside your body is something doctors are only now beginning to fully understand.
Today, we're going to follow a single stress hormone from the moment you wake up to the moment you try to sleep, hour by hour, organ by organ, so you can finally understand what chronic stress is actually doing to you.
That hormone is cortisol. In small doses, it's essential for life. It regulates energy, controls inflammation, and helps you respond to challenges. But when cortisol stays elevated, it becomes a weapon your own body turns against itself. One study followed 276 healthy volunteers. After just 6 days of high stress, 90% of them caught a cold when exposed to the same virus. The unstressed group, almost none got sick. The only difference, cortisol. 8 a.m. Your alarm goes off. Before your eyes even open, your cortisol has already spiked, rising 50% above its overnight baseline in the first 30 minutes of waking. This morning's spike is completely normal. In a healthy body, cortisol wakes you up, sharpens your mind, and primes your muscles for the day. It's nature's perfect alarm system.
But in chronically stressed people, cortisol doesn't come back down. It stays elevated all day, like an emergency alarm that no one turns off. And your organs are forced to live in constant red alert.
Imagine your car alarm going off, and no one can stop it. Neighbors are staring. You're exhausted. But the alarm just keeps screaming. That's your cortisol. That's your body under chronic stress. The first organ to suffer when cortisol stays high is your brain. And not just any part. One very specific region that controls everything you care about. It's called the hippocampus. Named after the Greek word for seahorse because it's shaped exactly like one. This tiny structure controls your ability to learn, remember, and regulate your emotions.
Every memory you have lives here. Every emotion you process passes through here. When you recognize a loved one's face, when you remember where you parked, the hippocampus is working.
Cortisol has more receptors in the hippocampus than anywhere else in the brain. This means when cortisol floods your bloodstream, the hippocampus absorbs the highest concentration of the hormone. The result is devastating. Under chronic cortisol exposure, the hippocampus physically shrinks. Brain scans show measurable volume loss. Neurons die. Synaptic connections break. The structure gets smaller. Here's what that looks like in real numbers. After just 3 months of chronic stress, MRI scans show the hippocampus losing 8% of its volume. In severely stressed people, up to 14% loss. That's measurable brain damage. The symptoms you feel, brain fog, memory lapses, irritability, anxiety, the inability to focus. These are not personality flaws. They are measurable neurological damage from prolonged cortisol exposure. At the same time, cortisol weakens your prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making center, and it hyperactivates your amygdala, the fear and emotion center. Logic goes offline. Panic takes the wheel.
This is why, under chronic stress, you make impulsive decisions. You overreact to small problems. You can't remember instructions you just heard. Your brain is literally operating in survival mode. not human mode.
It's now 10 a.m. Cortisol has had your brain under siege for 2 hours, and now it turns its attention to the second organ, your immune system, the army that keeps you alive.
Your immune system deploys 3 types of warriors: natural killer cells that hunt cancer and viruses, T cells that coordinate the attack, macrophages that consume dead cells and bacteria. Together, they run 24-hour surveillance of your entire body.
But when cortisol floods the bloodstream, it sends a direct chemical signal to these warriors. Stand down. Retreat to base. The body thinks there's an immediate physical threat, and immune surveillance gets suspended. This made perfect sense 50,000 years ago. If a lion was chasing you, you didn't need immune surveillance. You needed legs. But today, the lion is your email inbox, your mortgage, your deadline, and your immune system stands down anyway. The numbers are alarming. Natural killer cell activity drops by up to 40% under chronic cortisol exposure. These are the cells that destroy cancer before it can multiply. When NK activity drops, early-stage cancer gets a 40% longer window to grow undetected. A landmark study tracked caregivers of Alzheimer's patients, one of the highest stress groups in existence. Their wounds took 24% longer to heal. Their immune response to vaccines was weaker. Their bodies had essentially downgraded to 60% immune capacity. Here's the cruel twist. Short-term cortisol actually reduces inflammation. That's why doctors use cortisone shots for injuries. But chronic cortisol causes the opposite: systemic inflammation throughout the entire body.
When cortisol chronically suppresses immune cells, they become dysregulated. They lose the ability to tell friend from foe, and they begin attacking the body's own tissues. This is the origin of autoimmune disease.
The result you feel on the surface? You get sick constantly. Every cold lasts 2 weeks. Every flu season finds you. Wounds take forever to heal. You feel perpetually run down. Your immune system is simply not doing its job. It's noon. Cortisol has spent the morning dismantling your brain and your immune system. Now it reaches the third organ, one that surprises most people: your gut. Your intestinal wall is just one single layer of cells called enterocytes. Yet it processes everything you eat, absorbs all your nutrients, and acts as an absolute barrier against 100 trillion bacteria living just centimeters away. Cortisol chemically degrades the proteins holding these cells together. The tight junctions loosen, gaps open between cells, and the barrier that should be impermeable suddenly has holes. Scientists call it intestinal hyperpermeability. The world calls it leaky gut. Through these gaps, undigested food proteins and bacterial toxins pour into your bloodstream. Your immune system has never seen these substances in the blood. It identifies them as invaders and launches a full immune attack. Everywhere. All the time. Meanwhile, cortisol directly reshapes your gut microbiome. Beneficial bacteria, the strains that produce vitamins, anti-inflammatory compounds, and digestive enzymes, they die off rapidly under cortisol exposure. Harmful strains fill the void. Here's the fact that shocks most people. 90% of your serotonin, your brain's happiness chemical, is made in your gut, not your brain. When cortisol destroys your microbiome, you run out of the very molecules that make you feel okay. That's why chronic stress and depression almost always arrive together. By 2 p.m., cortisol has moved from your brain and immune system, and it's found its next target, one that you can literally see in the mirror: your belly fat. Here's the biochemistry. Cortisol activates an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, specifically in abdominal fat cells. This enzyme pulls fat from your bloodstream and stores it in your belly. The more cortisol, the more the enzyme fires. This is why stress makes you gain weight, specifically in the abdomen. Not your legs, not your arms, your belly. Cortisol is literally programming your fat cells to store there.
Why the belly? Evolutionary biology again. Abdominal fat sits close to the liver and can be rapidly converted to energy when the body needs to fight or flee. Your body thinks you're preparing for battle, and it's preloading fuel in the most accessible location.
But here's the problem with modern chronic stress. You never fight the lion. You never flee. The preloaded belly fat just stays there, and cortisol keeps adding more. There's a second mechanism. Cortisol blocks the action of insulin, the hormone that moves sugar from your blood into cells. Under chronic cortisol, blood sugar stays elevated. Your body converts that excess sugar to more belly fat. People with the highest cortisol levels have waist measurements 3 inches larger than people with the lowest. Not from overeating, just from cortisol. The hormone literally sculpts your body shape. It's 4 p.m. Cortisol hasn't finished. The next organ in its path is one you can't live without for more than a few minutes: your heart. Cortisol directly raises your blood pressure by constricting blood vessels and increasing the force of each heartbeat. In the short term, this gets oxygenated blood to your muscles fast. It's a feature, not a bug. But under chronic cortisol, your blood pressure stays elevated around the clock, and the blood vessels stay in a constant state of constriction, creating what doctors call endothelial dysfunction. The endothelium is the inner lining of your blood vessels. It's just one cell thick, just like the gut lining, and cortisol damages it in the same way. It becomes stiff, inflamed, less flexible. People with the highest stress scores have a 40% higher risk of heart attack than low-stress individuals. Not from cholesterol, not from genetics. The risk comes from elevated cortisol damaging the vessel walls directly. Cortisol also thickens your blood. It increases platelet aggregation, the tendency of blood cells to clump together. In a battlefield, this prevents you from bleeding out. In a modern office, it creates blood clots. The combination of constricted vessels, elevated pressure, damaged walls, and thicker blood is the perfect recipe for a cardiovascular event. And your body runs this recipe every single day under chronic stress. Your heart itself begins to change under prolonged cortisol exposure. The left ventricle, the heart's main pumping chamber, thickens its walls, trying to compensate for the constant elevated pressure. This makes the heart less efficient, not more. The result you feel? Racing heart for no reason, chest tightness, high blood pressure that won't respond to lifestyle changes, shortness of breath. Your cardiovascular system is being systematically worn down by a hormone your body makes every day. By 6 p.m., the bloodstream carries cortisol to the liver, and the liver has a very specific and very destructive response to it. The liver's job under stress is simple: dump more glucose into the blood. This gives muscles the sugar they need to fight or run. Cortisol triggers this response every single time it circulates through the liver. In short-term stress, this works perfectly. You need blood sugar up, you run, you use the sugar, blood sugar returns to normal. Clean and elegant.
But under chronic stress, the liver keeps dumping glucose. Cortisol keeps triggering it. Blood sugar stays elevated, even if you haven't eaten. And eventually, your cells stop responding to insulin's signal. That's insulin resistance.
Here's how chronic stress causes type 2 diabetes without you changing your diet at all. Elevated cortisol forces the liver to dump excess glucose. Blood sugar stays chronically high. Insulin resistance develops. The progression takes 3 to 7 years. Most people never connect it to stress.
Meanwhile, the liver is also receiving the inflammatory signals from your leaky gut, bacterial toxins that slipped into your bloodstream at noon. The liver filters them, but at a massive inflammatory cost.
Liver enzymes rise. Inflammatory markers flood the organ. Fat begins to accumulate in liver cells, a condition called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And the primary driver isn't alcohol. It's cortisol combined with the gut-liver inflammatory pipeline. Your liver, the organ that processes everything, medications, hormones, toxins, is now running at compromised capacity. It can't clear cortisol efficiently. Cortisol builds up further. The cycle tightens.
Everything I've shown you is real science, and it explains why so many people who eat right and exercise still struggle with their health. The missing piece is almost always cortisol, and what it does to the gut, liver, and brain.
If you want evidence-based solutions, the link in the pinned comment leads to a site about simple, natural supplements that support what we've been discussing: cortisol balance, gut health, and inflammation. Not miracle cures, just what actually works. MaestroLee.com. Now, back to your body. It's evening. Cortisol has been elevated for 12 hours. 6 systems have been altered, and the most insidious part hasn't happened yet. Your adrenal glands, 2 small glands sitting on top of your kidneys, produce cortisol, adrenaline, and hormones that regulate blood pressure, energy, inflammation, and sex hormone production. Under chronic stress, the adrenal glands are asked to produce cortisol non-stop. Initially, they adapt. Their output increases, but they have a finite capacity, and chronic stress eventually exhausts it.
When the adrenals begin to fatigue, cortisol output becomes irregular, sometimes too high, sometimes crashing too low. The body loses its ability to regulate the stress response. The symptoms? Crushing fatigue that doesn't resolve with sleep. Energy crashes at 3 p.m., wired but tired at night, craving salt and sugar, difficulty recovering from illness or exercise. Sound familiar?
The adrenals also produce DHEA, the anti-aging counterweight to cortisol. In youth, DHEA is high and cortisol is balanced. Under chronic stress, cortisol consumes the raw material that would have gone to DHEA. You age faster at the hormonal level. Cortisol has moved through your brain, your immune system, your gut, your heart, your liver, and your adrenal glands. 6 systems. And now, evening turns to night. The 7th and final target is one you visit every single day: sleep.
It's 10 p.m. In a healthy body, cortisol is at its lowest point right now, near zero. This is the biological signal that allows melatonin to rise and sleep to begin. But in a chronically stressed body, cortisol hasn't dropped. it's still circulating. Melatonin and cortisol are biological opposites. When cortisol is high, melatonin stays suppressed. Your brain cannot initiate deep sleep while cortisol is still present. The result is that familiar state, exhausted but wide awake, wired but tired.
Your sleep has 4 stages. The deepest and most restorative, slow-wave sleep, requires cortisol to be almost completely absent. Under chronic cortisol, the brain skips this stage. You sleep, but you don't recover. Slow-wave sleep is when your brain runs its maintenance cycle. The glymphatic system, your brain's cleaning crew, flushes out metabolic waste, including amyloid beta, the protein linked to Alzheimer's disease. When cortisol blocks deep sleep, that cleaning cycle doesn't run. People with chronically elevated cortisol spend 40% less time in slow-wave sleep. Their brains accumulate 2 to 3 times more amyloid beta overnight. Not from genetics, not from age, from cortisol blocking the brain's cleaning cycle. Cortisol is supposed to follow a circadian rhythm, peaking at 8 a.m. to wake you up, hitting its lowest point around midnight. Chronic stress destroys this rhythm. Cortisol peaks become flat. The morning surge weakens. The nighttime low never fully arrives. The result? You struggle to wake up feeling rested because the cortisol surge that's supposed to energize you has been blunted. And you struggle to fall asleep because the cortisol low that's supposed to invite sleep never happens. During normal slow-wave sleep, growth hormone surges, repairing muscle, bone, and cellular damage accumulated during the day. When cortisol blocks slow-wave sleep, growth hormone doesn't surge. The repair cycle doesn't run.
This is how chronic stress accelerates physical aging. Every night of disrupted sleep is a night the body didn't fully repair itself. After years of this, the structural damage compounds.
People who average less than 6 hours of quality sleep due to chronic stress show biological age markers 5 to 10 years older than their chronological age. Their telomeres are shorter. Their cellular repair is compromised. Cortisol is aging them from the inside.
Now we reach the 7th system. It's not a single organ. It's the entire hormonal axis that cortisol suppresses to keep its own production going. Your thyroid and your reproductive system. Cortisol tells the hypothalamus to reduce the signals that drive thyroid hormone production. In the short term, this slows metabolism. The body conserves energy for the emergency. In the long term, it leads to subclinical hypothyroidism, slow metabolism, weight gain, cold intolerance, brain fog.
Cortisol does the same to reproductive hormones. It suppresses LH and FSH, the signals that drive estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone production. Under chronic cortisol, sex hormone production drops. Libido disappears. Menstrual cycles become irregular. In men, testosterone falls. This is the biological priority system at work. Cortisol tells the body reproduction and long-term growth are non-essential during an emergency. Thyroid and sex hormones get shut down to redirect resources to cortisol production. Under chronic stress, the emergency never ends, so neither does the shutdown.
And now we can close the loop. You woke up with cortisol activated by the alarm. Your hippocampus tagged the situation as dangerous. Your immune system inflamed. Your gut leaked. Your liver dumped glucose. Your heart strained. Your adrenals fatigued. And at night, your sleep couldn't repair any of it.
Because the disrupted sleep means tomorrow your brain wakes up with less repair done, more inflammation active, and less cortisol rhythm control. The next day's stress triggers an even stronger response. Your hippocampus, already shrunken, has less capacity to turn the alarm off. The cycle tightens with every pass.
This is chronic stress, not a dramatic breakdown, a slow, methodical, organ-by-organ degradation, driven by a hormone your body makes every day that standard blood work almost never measures.
Most people spend 10 to 15 years managing the symptoms: gut issues, weight gain, brain fog, heart problems, low energy, without ever identifying the root cause. Because nobody tested cortisol patterns. They just treated the organs one by one. 7 systems, 24 hours, 1 hormone. The brain shrinks, immunity collapses, the gut leaks, fat accumulates, the heart strains, the liver inflames, the adrenals exhaust, sleep fails to repair, and the next day it starts again, slightly worse. So what do you actually do about it? Because understanding the mechanism is only useful if you can interrupt it. The research points to 3 categories that directly reduce cortisol at the physiological level. Not management, not coping, actual cortisol reduction. Category 1, sleep optimization. Not more sleep, better sleep architecture. Lowering room temperature to 65 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit initiates the thermal drop your body uses as a sleep signal. Blocking blue light after sunset protects melatonin. Even 7 nights of improved sleep architecture reduces cortisol by 15 to 20%. Category 2, adaptogenic support. A class of herbs studied specifically for their effect on the HPA axis, the system that controls cortisol. Ashwagandha reduces cortisol by 27% in randomized controlled trials. Rhodiola reduces acute stress response within 20 minutes. Holy basil lowers the baseline cortisol rhythm over 30 days. These are exactly the compounds on maestrali.com, the link in the pinned comment. The site is built around this science, targeted supplements for people dealing with cortisol, gut damage, and sleep disruption. Not a pharmacy, just what the research actually supports. If this video resonated, that's the place to start.
Category 3, the most powerful cortisol intervention discovered. Zone 2 cardio. Sustained low-intensity aerobic movement, a brisk walk, a light jog, for 20 to 30 minutes lowers cortisol acutely and rebuilds cortisol rhythm over time. It's also the only known intervention that reverses hippocampal shrinkage. These 3 work because they address the mechanism, not the symptom. They reduce cortisol directly. They allow the gut lining to reseal. They let the liver clear the hormone backlog. They restore slow-wave sleep. And they give the hippocampus enough quiet to begin turning the alarm down. 12 weeks of these 3 combined, sleep optimization, adaptogenic support, Zone 2 cardio, produces measurable reductions in inflammatory markers, improved insulin sensitivity, restored gut microbiome diversity, and cortisol patterns that return toward a healthy circadian rhythm. The damage is not permanent.
The body is remarkably capable of repairing itself when the cortisol load is reduced. The gut lining can reseal in 4 to 8 weeks. Immune regulation can normalize in 6 to 10 weeks. Even the hippocampus shows measurable regrowth within 12 weeks of reduced cortisol and consistent Zone 2 exercise.
But the window matters.
The longer chronic stress continues, the longer recovery takes. Early intervention at year 2 is dramatically easier than intervention at year 10. The alarm doesn't turn itself off. The hippocampus can't recover while the stressor is still active. The first step is always awareness, knowing what the hormone is actually doing, and then systematically removing the triggers that keep it elevated. If you found this useful, a subscribe takes 2 seconds, and it means this content reaches people who actually need it. More deep dives on hormonal connections between chronic stress, metabolic dysfunction, and brain health are coming. This is the first in the series. And if you want the tools we covered, the sleep protocol, the adaptogen stack, the Zone 2 framework, MaestroLee.com has all of it laid out simply. No overwhelming protocol, just the minimum effective dose the research supports for this specific problem. Chronic stress isn't a personality type. It's not weakness. It's a hormone, running a program that made perfect sense 100,000 years ago in a world that no longer exists. Once you understand what it's doing, you can interrupt it. That's what this channel is for. See you in the next one.